I shot at him as he at me. So they both are fighting is what we understand. Alliteration, as you already know, it is the repetition of same sound in the beginning of the word. He was not on his side, he was on the other side. That's the reason he had to kill him. There was no other reason. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds in the same line. Like we have assonance, we have consonants also. Hello everyone, I am Dr. Shalini, Professor of English, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Today I am here to understand one of the poem prescribed by University of Mysuru for first sem B.Ca. Let us understand the poem, The Man He Killed. So this poem is written by Thomas Hardy. Let us see what is there in today's session. We'll be understanding about the poet, then we'll move on to the title of the poem. We'll understand the theme, then next we'll move on to the summary of the poem. We'll next move on to the poetic devices. At last, we'll understand the conclusion. So let us begin this session with the introduction of the poet. Thomas Hardy was a very famous novelist and a poet. He was a Victorian poet. That means he started writing during the time of Victoria. So he was from the tradition of George Eliot. He was influenced both in his novels as well as his poetry by Romanticism and also the poems of Wordsworth. So George Eliot and William Wordsworth had a great influence on Thomas Hardy. His other poems that are very famous are The Oxen, The Darkling Thrush and The Neutral Tones. His short stories that are very famous are Far from the Madding Crown, The Return of the Native and Jude the Obscure. Jude the Obscure is actually very famous out of all these three that are specified here. So now let us move on to the title of the poem. So this poem begins with the hypothetical thought that the speaker and a man meet up in a hotel or a restaurant. There you call it as inn, I-N-N, inn. So they meet up there. It was an imaginary situation, hypothetical, that is not present, that doesn't happen, that isn't happening, but they have imagined that. Because this title is The Man He Killed, so this readers can assume that the speaker or somebody who is talking in this poem has actually killed a person. Okay, so he is giving a hypothetical to help the readers to understand the poem, that is the humanity between each of them. So that humanitarian grounds that are there, so that he wants the readers to understand. So moving on to the theme of the poem. We understood the title now. We'll now move on to the theme. The theme, that is The Man He Killed, it talks about the distortion of good and generous impulses of war. So how does war affect even the smallest root of the society? Even the person who is at the lowest level in the society is what the poet is talking about in this poem. So here this poem actually illustrates the speaker who is describing his natural sympathy for having killed a man, saying that he was probably down on his luck. So let us understand what is there in this poem now. Okay, so the poet talks about so many things over here, the impulses of war, then even though he didn't want to kill the man, why he killed. So all these we are going to understand in this poem now. To begin with, we'll start with the first stanza. Had he and I but met by some old ancient inn, we should have sat us down to wet, right many a nipperkin. So here, let me just tell you what is a nipperkin. Nipperkin is actually a measurement. It is this way. So it is a measurement, a cup kind of thing, wherein drinks is served. Only you can also term it as a pint. Okay, so a very little quantity wherein one or two gulps can be there. So that is called as a nipperkin. That measurement, that cup is called as a nipperkin. So the speaker, that is the person who is narrating, is actually talking about he and that person. Okay, so I is the speaker and the other person he is talking about. Suppose they had met in an old inn, that is ancient inn. Inn is a hotel. Okay, suppose they had met in a restaurant, what would happen? They would have sat down to write many a nipakin. That means they would start drinking in a friendly state, is what he says. Suppose we had met in a hotel, we could have done that. But what happens here? That was a hypothetical situation, means they have not met there, but this is just an imagination. Had we met there, this would have happened, but that has not happened. What has happened here now? But ranged as infantry. Infantry is a section of army. Okay, infantry, cavalry. So all these are the sectors of army. And staring face to face. That means these both are staring each other. That means they are in the opposite parties in a war. I shot at him as he at me. So they both are fighting, is what we understand. Okay, and killed him in his place. So the other person also shoots at the narrator, and this speaker, that is the narrator, also shoots at the other person. But that person loses the shot, but here loses the aim. But here this author, that is the speaker, actually shoots it correctly and he kills him in his place. That means he actually killed him in his party only, is what he says. I shot him dead because, so there is a pause over here. Okay, that means he is trying to tell us the reason. I shot him because he was my foe. Foe is an enemy. Okay, so why did he shoot him? There should be some reason for shooting, right? He was my foe. So what made him his foe? Why was that other person his enemy? Just so my foe, of course, he was. He was just his foe. That's clear enough, although. So here, he was only his foe. What was the reason for him to be his enemy? He was just in the opposite side of the army. Okay, he was not on his side, he was on the other side. That's the reason he had to kill him. There was no other reason. They were actually friends outside the war field, but since they meet in the war field and they had to fight against each other, this narrator had shot at him and he had killed him. As such, there was no reason at all. That's clear enough. That means he was just only a foe. Just so my foe, of course, he was. So why does he say that? He doesn't say any proper reason, because he was my foe. There is no reason for that. Okay, he just says he was my enemy. There is no reason for that. That's clear enough, although I think being an enemy is clear enough that I killed him. So that is what he says. There is no proper reason at all, but he had to kill him only because he was in the opposite side of the army. He thought he would list perhaps offhand, just as I was out of work, had sold his traps, no other reason why. So now he is talking about his relationship with the other person. Okay, so many times he was out of work, he had no other work. Okay, like he did not have any other work other than in the army. Okay, so it is out of his duty he did, that is what he is trying to say. That is the narrator is trying to say. So it was his duty to fight against the other party, and that is the reason he had to kill him. Okay, he was out of work and that's why he had to kill him. Yes, quaint and curious war is. It is an ancient or the age-old practice, you can say. Okay, so quaint and curious war is, you shoot a fellow down, you treat if met where any bar is, or help to half a crown. Half a crown is to kill a king also. Okay, so this way, suppose you kill some other person there. Means suppose you defeat the other side. Okay, suppose you defeat your opponent, then you can go for a treat to some bar. Okay, you can also do something that is half a crown. That means you can just drink well and you can just treat yourself, is what he is trying to say. So from this poem, it is very clear that the poet did not have any reason, but he thought he would list, perhaps probably that other man thought perhaps he would not kill him because they would meet in the bar, they would enjoy themselves. But that was false. He wanted to do his duty. Okay, this narrator wanted to do his duty. That's the reason he had to kill the other person. That's how he is justifying his killing. Okay, he is not he is not feeling sorry for that also. He is very happy that he has done his duty, and he also says that this is the way a war works only. Okay, so you fight somewhere outside. If you win, you can go and party. If you lose, then you are dead. But at the same time, if you party, then there can be so many ways in which you can party. Okay, so this is the summary of the poem. Now we'll move on to the poetic devices. At first we have assonance. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds, A, E, I, O, U, those sounds in the middle of the words. Okay, so for example, sound of O, that is a long vowel, so that is repeated. Okay, that is O sound is repeated. You should a fellow down. Okay, so that O sound is repeated, that is assonance. Okay, then it is alliteration. Alliteration, as you already know, it is the repetition of same sound in the beginning of the word. Okay, so that creates a rhythm actually. So here in succession, usually in succession, so here you can see her sound is repeated. How? It is had, he and I but met. So here her sound is repeated. There are many other sounds also, like this was just an example I gave you. Okay, next we have consonants. Consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds in the same line. Like we have assonance, we have consonants also. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds, whereas consonance is the repetition of consonant sounds. Something like this, n sound is repeated, and here f, that is f sound is repeated. Here you can see my foe, of course. It need not have to be in the beginning only or in the end only like that. If it is only in the beginning, then it is alliteration. But here it is in the beginning, here it is not in the beginning. Okay, so here it can be consonants. Similarly, here n sound is repeated, ranged as infantry. Okay, and a sound is also repeated. You can give that as an example for assonance also. Okay, so here this is an example for consonants. Okay, that is the repetition of the consonant sound. Next is enjambment. As I told you in the previous session, enjambment is actually the sentence doesn't end in the first line only. It continues to the next one also. Okay, so here is an example. You shoot a fellow down. The sentence is not complete over here. It continues to the next one also. You treat if met where any bar is. There also sentence isn't complete. It goes to the next line again. Okay, so sentence doesn't get completed here. That is, the sentence is not complete, but it goes to the next line also in order to complete the meaning, and this is called as enjambment. Okay, next we have imagery. Imagery is something which creates a feeling of that is, you get an image in your mind. Okay, so imagery is used to make readers perceive things involving their five senses. So their five senses are involved there, and you create an imagination of or a picture in your mind. For example, had he and I but met. So you have to imagine over there. The poet is trying to create an imagination, that is, create an image in your mind that they both have met. And here I shot at him as he at me. So that also you imagine. The whole poem actually you imagine in your mind, isn't it? There are few places in which you go to imagination. Probably the other person meeting him and this imagination, all these. Okay, so this is actually an imagination, and this comes under the poetic device imagery. Okay, next we have irony. Irony is also a figure of speech wherein the contradictory ideas are put together. So here you can see the poet has actually used an ironic expression in the first stanza of the poem. So how does he use that? That he would not kill the man if they had met in a bar. They had met in the war field, that's why he had killed. Had they met in the bar, he wouldn't have killed him, though he is an enemy there also. Okay, the place where they meet is what the matter is. Okay, so if they both had met in a bar, then he wouldn't have killed him. So that is an irony there. Next, the last one is the symbolism. Symbolism is the use of many symbols to signify the ideas and qualities, and these actually give them some symbols that they represent something, is what we have to understand. So they are actually different from the literal meanings. Okay, you have to read in between lines and you have to understand. So actually war here refers to the senselessness. You can understand, because they met in the war only, in the war field only, the narrator had to kill the other person. Okay, because there was no other reason for him to kill, only because he was in the opposite side he had to kill him. Okay, so this is what the this is what symbolism is. Okay, so this is also a figure of speech. Next we move on to the conclusion, that is what is the ending of the poem. The Man He Killed actually was published in 1902. This has a message which is actually timeless, means it is not limited to that time only, that is not limited to the 1902, that time itself, it is relevant even today. This subject matter is the curious nature of war that allows for such a behavior as killing a man with whom under more mundane circumstances you would sit sharing drinks. Suppose it was not the war, you would have enjoyed with that person. Since it is the war field that the narrator and the other person have met, they had to fight against each other. There is no other go. That is the senseless quality of a war. Some kings will have rivalry against each other, but these people had to struggle. Okay, so that is the example I'm giving you. The holders of the power may have some rivalry, but the ones who are at the lower level are going to suffer. Okay, only the kings don't fight, isn't it? The army fights. So there will be a huge loss of life and all that. He wants to show that, the poet wants to show that in this poem. So that's why he has used so many symbols and imagery also. Okay, so this was the summary of The Man He Killed. I would suggest you to watch the video, then go back to the poem and read it for a better understanding. Thank you so much for your time. Let us meet again with another more interesting session. Take care. Bye-bye. See you soon.